Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. I'm just gonna give a couple of seconds here, warm up the room, make sure you guys can hear me. Sometimes that audio can sometimes not come through for you. We do have some troubleshooting steps we will give you. Got a good attendance of folks here so far, but inside of the chat window, folks, if you can indeed hear me coming through okay, would love for you to filter yourselves into that chat room and tell us where you're coming in from. That's something we tend to do on a lot of our webinars here at Visme. We like to ask folks, where are you dialing in from? I always say it's like one of my favorite parts of our webinars because we get to see where everybody's joining us from all the four corners of the world. I'm seeing folks type, which is a very good sign, telling me that you guys can hear me. In the event that some of you might not be able to hear me, oh, we've got rain over there in London today. Oofda. Yeah, it's starting to get really chilly here in the US too. I mean, northern US, I should at least say. I'm based in Wisconsin myself. Folks coming in everywhere. Germany, California, Texas, Oregon. Oh, wow. Scotland. Love it, guys. Thanks so much for jumping in there, giving me that confidence level that you guys can hear me okay. For those of you that might still be having some audio issues, here's some troubleshooting steps for you on screen. Refreshing your browser. We do recommend that you use Chrome. Check your audio device settings, exit, rejoin, close down some of the tabs in order to spare bandwidth inside of your window. In the event that all of a sudden any of this happens throughout the session, feel free to try some of these steps here, everybody, and join us back because we have a great session in store for you today. With that being said, today's topic at hand is fostering company culture in the context of hybrid and remote work. To introduce myself, my name is Kaylin Lewis. I'm head of customer experience here at Visme. I will be handing things off to our speakers for today's webinar, including Payman Tai, who is our founder and CEO at Visme, Asad Ali, who is senior brand manager at Sendinblue, as well as Morgan Zients. Am I saying that right, Morgan? Zients?
You are. Rhymes with science.
Love that. I nailed it. And that's the webinar manager at Jotform. Really great group of folks joining us today, everybody, along with an excellent topic at hand. I'm going to be going over communication strategy, ensuring employees feel supported, empowered, and connected, and how can you use different tools in order to help that. Of course, a lot of that becoming even more so relevant ever since COVID and changing our world of work and moving a lot more business to remote work culture. With that being said, we are going to kick things off today. I do have the mic being passed to Payman Tai at first, founder and CEO at Visme. Before I do that, Payman, allow me to just give folks a little bit more of a logistical housekeeping item. We will have a live Q&A at the end of today's session. But at the same time, we want you to filter any of those questions as they come to mind to us as the session is happening. We don't feel like you have to save those to the end. If they're front of mind right now, feel free to filter those into the questions tab inside of Livestorm, the solution we're using today. That will allow us to kind of keep dibs of any questions. If there are questions that can be answered by today's moderators, we will be happy to answer those directly inside of that questions window, but we might even swing some of those and cover those live at the tail end of today's session. Of course, we want you to drop in any statements or thoughts that you have via chat. We also love emoji reactions as well. So feel free to participate as much as you'd like in today's webinar. That being said, Payman, happy to pass things off to you.
Alrighty, perfect. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I'm excited to have all of you here. Today, I'm going to be sharing my screen in just a few moments, and we're going to be talking about, of course, fostering company culture in the context of hybrid and remote work. So the reality is today, and at least for the last couple of years, there was this dramatic shift, you all know, thanks to COVID, or I guess no thanks to COVID, where now there is majority of you probably are working remote. And you can put that in if any of you guys are actually still working on site in an office, please go ahead and put a message in the chat so that we can see, you are probably the needle in the haystacks at this point. I'm at our office here in the DC area, north of DC, but our office is virtually empty. Once a month, a couple of people come in. Once a week, a few people show up, but essentially majority of our team is now remote. So most of you are doing the same thing. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And by the way, I'm going to turn off my video as well in just a moment to maximize the bandwidth so that you can see the highest quality of the screen share. Let's go ahead and do that. Share screen. I'm going to turn all the bells and whistles off. Alrighty, so you should be able to see some sort of a matrix view, a lot of zooms going in. And let me take a look at some of so I see the messages right now, working in office. So wow, some of you guys are hybrid and remote. All right, here's the screen share. And by the way, I'm going to be sharing my screen, going through the slides. And as I switch to my colleagues here on the webinar, I will be presenting first. Then we will go to my other colleagues on the sharing part. We're going to be going through different aspects and different angles. I mean, we're 3 different companies that are essentially working in both a hybrid and remote. And so we are going to be bringing 3 different angles. I'm going to be sharing things that are, at least from my perspective, the onboarding process and how we work here at Visme to maximize success for our Vismeers, as we call them. It may be a little bit different from others. I think the takeaway here for you today would be to basically decide what could potentially be best for your culture and for your environment. And I'm sure that you're going to find some balance between all of them. All right, so let's get started here. Going to the next slide. So our speakers today, there's me right there. This is a little bit of a younger picture of me, by the way. And Mr. Asad Ali, Senior Brand Manager at Sendinblue. And of course, we have Morgan here from Jotform. I'm going to say Zion, so I believe I got your name right. Webinar Manager at Jotform. And we're going to be going in this order as well. And this presentation today is brought to you by Visme, fully designed with all the assets, graphics, everything other than the photos you see here are created entirely in Visme. And it's basically the tool of choice we use. And as you'll see in just a few minutes, not just for our sales and marketing, but for our internal use as well. Kalen lives inside the tool. We use it for our onboarding, and we'll show you some screenshots of that. That I think you probably would find intuitive for some of the HR-related work that you may potentially do in addition to others. So again, repeating again, fostering company culture in the context of hybrid and remote work. I'm going to be going through some of the areas here. So number one, the critical role of onboarding and fostering and maintaining. Let me put this into perspective. We used to be pretty bad on onboarding in Visme. To the fact that we actually, I believe, at least a majority related to the onboarding process, the failure of our proper onboarding process. This is going, some years ago, we lost some good candidates that actually had joined Visme. And so we decided to turn things around and take a more holistic approach. And I can tell you that if you do the onboarding process properly, it does require more work and more effort than most of you may be used to seeing or doing. It actually does have a big ROI. It really is. And I think great employees who understand the brand and the culture of an organization, they are probably the best investments any company can make, better than advertising and everything else. So we live and are continually working on improving our onboarding process, not just at the stage of onboarding, but also post, quarterly reviews, ongoing surveys, and finding feedback. And this is something that's constantly, organically in the work for us. We haven't fully figured out yet, but I think we've gotten much better at it. All right, so again, why is it important? Dividing it down to 3 different areas. The employee, the individual that's joining the company, they need to clearly know what their role is. And they also need to understand the company's philosophy, their mission statement, not just memorizing a mission statement, but like the DNA of the company. What is this brand about? What is this company about? Why is it that, I want to join and be a part of this? And what is it that I can contribute to being a bigger part of this organization? And of course, last but not least, what the company has to offer me in return. I'm not talking about compensation, but as far as it is a tango, it is a dance. I mean, it is a give and take. At the end of the day, an employee joins a company because they want to have certain benefits. Again, this does not necessarily mean salary. I'm talking about other aspects from a life and work culture balance, from having this self-fulfillment is that I'm working at this company. I mean, I cannot tell you enough about our amazing team at Visme and the individuals that every so often I hear these messages, DMs come to me and say, I love being a part of this company. I love this, the things that we're working on, not just a product, but this a new improvement in the onboarding process, or this improvement about having, our Slack and a birthday. And every so often some, whole lot of people come in, 70, 80 people giving me thank you and welcome messages, sending me gifts on my birthday. I mean, it is a part of a community. So it goes hand in hand. And therefore, these are the 3 areas that you want your employees to get comfortable and also understand their role and the responsibilities, and of course, what they're going to be a part of. And, of course, you want them to be a part of the team. All of those three equate to that. This is statistics conducted by Career Builder and Silkwork Technologies, where basically 10% of individuals had, former employees had actually said that they left the company because of a poor onboarding experience. And you think about it, that may not seem like a huge, it's like 1 out of 10, not so bad. But you think about how many, when we're filling key roles at Visme, we get tens and tens of applications. And I personally review a lot of the key roles. Anything that's a manager role, I'm part of the pre-qualifying process, or even at least in the mid-interview process. And you go through a lot of candidates, and that decision that you make on that individual isn't that, well, if we hire 10 people, we might lose one. That one person is a restart. If they leave, is a restart of an entire process. Not only didn't they contribute to their maximum during the time they were here, but you have to start that entire process all over again. So that 10% is actually a much bigger deal than the number may pertain. So let's talk about a little poll. When do you start onboarding employees? Most people, and I used to think, well, they're hired day one, let's start onboarding them. And then maybe there's a few days, a couple meetings after, great, then onboarded, on their way. Here's a document, your roles and responsibilities, meet with this person, and then on your way. I'm kind of making it a little bit clear cut, but that's essentially what happens in a lot of companies. There are large companies where you're literally given a intranet system, and then you're on your own. Go search it. Everything you need is there. So it's kind of, at smaller companies like ours, which we're about less than 100 people, about 90-something people now. A lot of us are hands-on, involved in ensuring that the individuals we hire, they feel a part of the community at Visme, and also they are onboarded properly. Is it after they finalize the contract, days before they get started? And of course, the check mark is there, or on their first day, days before they get started. So for example, let's say that we had formalized a new hire with an employee. Let's say it was a sales position. And they give their notice, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks notice to their company, whatever that ends up being. Our onboarding process begins a good 1 to 2 weeks before that. And that's usually a meeting, and I'll go through that a little more context. That would be Zoom meetings, certain information provided. And that is to really start getting them comfortable and know what they will be going to be getting into. Because if we don't want to do this shock and awe system. Day one start, here's a ton of information and material, and it's just a little bit overwhelming. And at the end of the day, the individual really feels, at times they may feel overwhelmed, and they're just not going to. We as humans, we don't absorb everything in one batch. You got to break it down into pieces. And that's essentially, we figured out that onboarding really allows us, when divided into multiple phases and steps, maximizes success and also information retention for the individual. So, that employee journey, this is kind of as we're, putting it forth. It starts with a recruiting, right? And then that's where the employee branding, company culture, and even the onboarding begins. So when we say onboarding, of course, this is not an early recruiting process. Actually, let me back up. Even during the early recruiting process. So for example, I personally had an interview yesterday with a potential candidate for a key role and for engineering side. And I literally, on that early conversation, ask a number of questions, and probably I would say in that 30 minutes, I may speak 10 to 12 minutes, maybe 15 minutes of it. That may seem very surprising because it's a pre-qualification. I want to make sure that individual feels that Visme could be potentially the right role for them. So it's not like this drilling them, all the way on the other side and finding out what they can contribute, but I want them to understand what they're going to be getting into. And so in fact, one of the things I always ask, and I ask my team, is that, before we get further into the recruiting process, it doesn't matter what role it is, whether it's a sales, marketing, support position, engineering position. One thing we ask them is, I want you to go spend 15 minutes, sign up free for a Visme account, spend 15 minutes in it. And I want you to feel like, is this something you want to be a part of, you want to work on? And of course, thankfully, the answer 99% of the time is absolutely, this is, I've never heard of you guys. What is this tool about? But we want them to understand that early on that this is not just about us, but it's also about them as well. Okay. Onboarding, of course, this is where, during that part, we're talking about technology and, of course, the knowledge as well. So technology, set it up, communication, Slack, Zoom, potentially Calendly, email activation, Gmail, Google Docs, Visme account, and all those things. As well, there is this set of information that is put together typically by the management of that sector. So if it's support, that is usually handled by the support manager. If it's engineering, by more the engineering manager or the product manager. And so that they are provided information that is key and specific to that position. And if you see, there's a big gap here because between the recruiting and the actual training where that starts, there's this gap. And let's say that's 2 weeks process. This is like right here, about a week and a half before that starts. Training, of course, and this was divided down into, let's say it could be departmental, as I mentioned, by the manager or the key individuals in that part. And then, of course, the expectations of the position and the responsibilities that they would have. By the way, it's not, at least for us at Visme, it is not bare bone where, okay, this individual is coming into the support and only the support manager is going to be working with them. Customer success manager would be working with an individual. There's individuals even on sales, head of sales may be working with that individual. So it could be a 2 to 3 step process, but of course the holder or the owner of that onboarding is typically the manager of that position. All right, so where are they going to get the information? So there's 4 different ways we've divided it by. And I guess this is more like a Venn diagram in a sense. So intranet, meetings, of course, right now meetings, remote, hardly any meetings are on site. So Zoom, Google, or Google Hangouts. I believe they changed the name on that recently, or any other, meeting platform. Email communications and LMS. So learning management system. Now let's kind of go through this. We've got a little hover over effect here on Visme, talking about, hey, after the contract signed, what are those methods of providing that information? So it's typically through meetings and email, of course, until it's formalized and legalities out of the way. We're not going to, bring them into Slack and other communications. So it's limited, but information that is needed for them to train and get prepared is provided through the meetings and email. And the day before they start, so learning management system. And usually when we say LMS, people really think about these very complex, large areas that are, packed with tons of information. It depends on your organization. For example, in terms of LMS, we use Visme as an LMS for our internal communications. We can create like this presentation here, and I'll show you an example a little bit. Can be password protected. It could be only invite only. Certain people can come in, and it can be literally a virtual interactive experience with links, with embedded of other, third-party sites and so on can be all embedded so that it literally serves as that. So we provide them this documentation, and it's like a walkthrough as they go through it itself. And of course, on the first day, everything opens up, right? Now they have access to the internet, meetings, emails, LMS to continue as needed. All right, let's go through another one. So how you communicate is key. And, at Visme, I think you probably haven't, by now you probably figured out what is Visme about. Well, the Viz, you can think of it as more visual. The Me is about you, us, all of us. So it's about visualizing information and making it easier and more snackable. So be visual compared to just text online. This has been proven over and over again. It's not a debate actually anymore that when you have information provided in a more visual or engaging format, information retention increases. Now, some have argued that, it's 60,000 times faster. Some have debated it's, X times faster or more efficient. Regardless of what that percentage is, there's no denial that when it's done properly, visuals, when you take not just text alone, but you pair it with images or graphs and data widgets and so on, like this one, people are just able to absorb that information much better, okay? So get personal. So having meetings. We're on Livestorm right now. It could be Zoom, we use that. It could be GoToMeetings, Google Hangouts, any of those platforms. You want to see face-to-face individual you're working to. You can't see them. You don't see them in person often, but you can see their expressions and how they talk and so on. Now, we at Visme, and I've actually instilled in my team to have less meetings and more meetings. And I asked my team, and everybody joins, and I said, please, anything that can be communicated through Slack or through chat, asynchronously, even through Loom, where you record screencasts and so on, please do it that way. Unless there is things that you can't easily translate, or it saves time to have a meeting, or it's more of a huddle. Let's go over and, the information that I shared with you, Google Doc, and here's the Google Sheet, review that information. Let's go over it and finalize if you have any questions. However, when it gets to onboarding, this is not something that's clear cut. You can't be so technical about it. You want to have some emotional connection as well, right? There's only so many things you can say on Slack or on chat or through email, but when you see somebody face to face, it makes a big difference to be able to really feel that they're genuine and what they're saying is related. And again, it's visual, right? You're speaking and you're hearing, and so that's that. Get personal. And of course, this may seem very odd for some of you. It's like, stay branded. What does that mean? It's an onboarding process, branding. Well, I'll give you a little more context. It's not just for marketing, folks. I mean, so as an example, we have onboarding document. In that document, the Visme signature with their logo, with very specific information is provided. So you can copy paste it into their signature email. And then additionally, that we get the Visme account to our own enterprise account, or it could be your team account. And that's where all the branding are set. So when they want to go create that next flyer, graphic, or internal communication, it's all branded. You'll see an example of that, I believe we have in the next slide. All right, so let's do a little bit of a little quick quiz here, I guess. Would you rather, communicate via text, or would you rather, do it visually? So, A or B, which one? Well, let's see. If it's text, that's what it would basically look like. And this is actual real email with, grayed out some of the information here, right? So that's that. And it's fine. I mean, this is how typically it's done. But what we've decided to do and switch to is, instead of doing, and by the way, this email may still be sent, but there will be a link which then will provide the visual. So let me show you. So here's the more visual, literally taking that information and so on is more in a visual format. Okay, so hey, welcome to Visme. This is an infographic in this case. It could be as tall as you want it to be. In fact, it actually goes longer. As you see, it's cut off. And then so, hey, we're so excited, meet our team. Here's our vision, our mission, and there's the links. And then we go in depth. And this is actually based on a template within Visme that companies are taking and just literally change the information to their needs. All right, so let's go next. All right, so create an interactive experience. We know design skills. I mean, last but not least, I mean, this presentation you just saw is entirely done in Visme, and I could have, done presentation notes here. It wasn't, we could go crazy interactive with this, and for the sake of today's webinar, we wanted to make it very clean and simple. But our platform, most see us as a presentation platform, and that's exactly what it is, but it's so much more. It is used to create documents, data visualizations for external and internal communication, and it can be as interactive as you want to be. So linking to slides, to different embedding other sites and content and so on, some of which I believe I had a couple of those showing to you. So I'm going to pass it on in the next slide, but I just want to let you know as well that if this is something that interests you, I think there will be links for all three platforms a little bit later on in the chat. And I'm going to pass it on next to Mr. Asad Ali from Sendinblue. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Payman. I mean, you made some great points. Honestly, I think the emotional connection is hit for me. And of course, someone working in brand, staying branded is essential. And I couldn't agree more. In short, really, my role at Sendinblue is, I'm here to build their brand narrative in North America. Payman, I think we're going to stick with you on sharing the slides, correct?
Yes, that is. Sorry about that. I was just turning my camera off. There you
go. Really, my role with Sendinblue is to build their brand awareness in North America. And with that, also the component comes in working on the employer brand itself. If you go to the next slide, taking a step back and really understanding how the work culture has changed, you can see during the pandemic itself how the hybrid model is being imposed by so many more companies. It's adapting this new model that seems so straightforward, but the nuances itself that come in through organizations is how do you work on the culture if you're working remotely. If you go to the next slide, you can understand with an example here. Airbnb announced this year that employees can live anywhere and work anywhere in the world. And that had such an interesting and positive effect on that they had over 800,000 people on their career site moments after the announcement was made. This really shows that's what people wanted, and it's what people want, and it's how it's really going to make that impact that you're looking for itself. If you go to the next slide, then we can see it's the same thing. What is a great place to work? And the difference really comes on how you define yourself as a good company and a great company, and all comes through one basic concept. It's how you build your company culture, and it's really what makes that impact itself. You have an amazing culture, you're going to be a great company. If you go to the next slide. Now, really bringing it all back, we can see how do you really build that culture? And I think we're all going to agree and say the same things on the basis. It's really how do you value your onboarding? You have to be very explicit on your work policies and really have the team understand those earlier than later. You build norms, you have your team activities, and you really define how your team works. When I joined Sendinblue, I actually created a document that said how to work with us, that really showed, this is how you can reach out to me, this is how my work culture is, and this is, what we can do to improve working together. What we did, and I did with my team, is really understand how we can work together with this. And we really established those norms and understandings. And with that, this last step that really comes in is collecting that feedback. No one is perfect, and how can you continuously improve the processes that you have to continuously build that culture? I like to say the willingness to change is to listen, and through listening, you can actually build the culture that your employees want and that a company wants that can effectively make that impact. If you go to the next slide. Really, why is culture so important? It's in short, it's really to make your employees into advocates. And if you have advocates of that, you focus on, having great well-being. You ensure your employees continuously retain within the company, and it helps you build a strong culture. When I joined Sendinblue, we were 200 employees. I've been there about 2 years, and we're over 600 now. So it's really showing how fast we're going and how important it is that we have a strong company culture to ensure that we retain top talent and that our employees are continuous advocates. I can proudly say I'm happy that I work with Sendinblue, and the impact that I'm making, phenomenal. If you go to the next slide. Quick note about Sendinblue. Really, what is Sendinblue? We're an all-in-one marketing platform. Really, it's a company that's headquartered in Paris. We have about 7 offices. We offer our services in 7 languages. We have over 300,000 customers, and like I mentioned, we're over 600 employees now. Soon to be 700. We just announced an acquisition. We acquired a company that we're using to help build our business unit, and the company is called Yodel. If you go to the next slide. Really, when it comes to the offer itself, you'll notice how I've written, simple, scalable, reliable, affordable. That's what we try to take. That's what we're presenting to our businesses and our customers. But this is something that we take to our employees as well, and how we can make that impact together. If you go to the next slide. Quickly, just highlighting a couple of features that might be of interest. And you'll see why I'm mentioning these now, because they're a big part of our onboarding as well. Like I mentioned, we're here to help brands communicate more directly with their customers, but really, we have features such as email marketing, live chat, landing pages. If you go to the next slide, we have automation, we have a CRM system. We have just so many tools that help a business really understand what makes the most sense. Just highlighting those real quick, but again, we can go to the next slide as well. And this is where we can actually bring it all together, how we can highlight what we do at Sendinblue to build that culture itself. Going to onboarding itself, we use a tool called Lessonly, which really helps you improve your team's performance and really understand the product inside out. Once you finish your onboarding on Lessonly, you actually use the Sendinblue tool to send out a newsletter. You send a newsletter to all of the Sendinblue employees, highlighting who you are, what your interests are, and why you joined Sendinblue. Similarly, we have a tool called Sendinblue Academy, which is our free tool. So if you're interested in learning more about what we have to offer, we actually have free tutorials itself. You can have your certification in email marketing or in marketing automations. It's really something that you're giving your employees the information that will help them succeed furthermore. If you go to the next slide. Building culture is essential. This is how we set up our work ethics itself. We have a hybrid work policy. 2 out of 5 days we're in office, and we have pizza Wednesdays. I put a question mark there because it's not pizza every week. We actually switched it up. Now, last week we had Thai food. Similarly, when it comes to meetings, as Payman previously mentioned, we try not to have too many meetings, but we try to have meetings where we can engage, have that emotional connection, and continuously build what we're trying to do. As I mentioned, we have a local office meeting daily, which is about 15 minutes. Once a week, we have a global team meeting, which is about 30 minutes. And we just interact, no work talk. We're just understanding what our day is like and what we're trying to do. We have a weekly marketing meeting where the whole marketing team comes up. We dedicate the first 10 minutes to get to know you. And what we do is we pick each member from our team and we highlight something that we want to share. Most recently, we've been sharing what countries we're from and sharing a bit about the culture itself. We also have monthly team socials. So one of our team members from our local teams decides what they want to host, and we do it. We've been for laser tag, we've been for bowling. I'm planning one where we're going to try Pakistani food. So it's exciting where we're trying different things and trying to incorporate the diversity that we have itself. If you go to the next slide. Feedback is essential. On Slack, we have an integration where we use a product called Culture Amp, which basically is a weekly feedback survey where we're trying to understand how we can push forward, what differences can we make, how our moods are within the company, and how our stress levels are, which is very essential in understanding. We have weekly donor calls where we can interact with anyone from the team. Like I mentioned, 600 employees. So there are 400 employees that have grown within the last 2 years. We also have a bi-weekly C-level check-in where we check in with our C-level. So I will be having that meeting with our CMO, and we will be just understanding strategy, where they're coming in from, to ensure that we're all on the same page. At that massive level of scale, it's not often that you see these interactions happening, but I really think what Sendinblue has been trying to do here is trying to make that really big impact and really try to include everyone as much as possible. And if you go to the next slide. This is a fun one for me. Team engagement. Twice or thrice a year, we have our annual strategy meetings. For example, like I mentioned, we're headquartered in Paris. What happens is the whole marketing team, for example, will end up going to Paris for a strategy session and really understanding, what we're doing, how can we align the strategy, how can we improve what we need to stop doing. Similarly, we have a biannual global company offsite. This year, we went to Marrakech in June for 400 of, I think there were 550 employees. Then we actually met together for the first time, people from different offices, and really we just interacted together, built our norms and understanding. I met people from the team that I never knew that I would meet. It's a very wholesome experience, and really we made bonds and connections that we wouldn't have made otherwise. Similarly, we have a fun thing that we do. It's called Sendinblue Got Talent, where we highlight our talents and we post them on Slack. We have a channel for it and really push forward to see how we want to engage. Really want to show people how we take the next steps forward and really how we make it all fun. And if you go to the next slide. And it really comes to bring it all together is how do we take the time to reimagine building culture? And it's unique, it's something new. I know there were a couple of people that mentioned they've been working remotely since 2012. That's amazing. Now it's become a time where the masses are going to be working remotely and really building that unique culture together. And as we reimagine it, we can see how we make that impact together, and make that impact together will be the key that will actually ensure us being productive, us staying, loyal to the companies, and really being advocates for where we work. With that, I'll pass it off to Morgan. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for the handoff, Asad. And I want to thank all of you for being here, as well as for Visme for hosting and my co-presenters today. Can we go to the next slide? So my name is Morgan Science. I am the webinar manager at Jotform. If you're not familiar with Jotform, we are the leading online form building tool We are also a workflow management and data management tool. We have free plans available, and the whole system is entirely no code. So you can really build anything you want. It's very flexible. We've been in business over 16 years, and we have over 16 million users worldwide. Speaking of worldwide, we have about 350, 400 employees in a number of international offices. That includes the majority of our company based out of 3 offices in Turkey. We have a small office in London, a small office in Sydney, and the US-based marketing team that I sit on is based out of San Francisco. We are 25 to 30 people, and we are one of the larger teams. Next slide. So I know Jotform is certainly not the only company that is distributed by nature, but we have been doing this, hybrid asynchronous communication for a while. The San Francisco office opened around 8 years ago. So we were pretty well prepared going into COVID and now going into post-COVID life to navigate the ins and outs of, what it takes to be successful when people can't be face-to-face. So I'm going to talk about the lessons that we've learned in the hopes that there might be something in here for all of you that you can take with you. I'll be talking about how we on the marketing team stay connected as a hybrid team and how we connect with the rest of the company. Spoiler alert, we use Jotform for a lot of it. So I'll also be talking about how we use Jotform throughout. Next slide. So our first lesson is that communication is key. I know, both the other presenters talked a little bit about this as well. I just received a marketing email this morning that the subject was something like communication is key to hybrid and remote work. Like how more perfect timing could you get? Hopefully this isn't anything that you're hearing for the first time. But some of the ways that we approach that our Jotform is that we have developed a successful asynchronous communication plan that works really well for us. We have our big picture company values communicated really well throughout the company, and that we find engaging ways to share team updates. Now, this goes back to what Payman was saying about wanting to have a visual representation of stuff rather than just reading an email. With regards to the asynchronous communication, that can mean multiple different things for different companies. But the thing I want to leave anybody with who is still figuring out how to do this, how to work in a hybrid environment, is that it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one-time decision. If you have frustrated employees who feel like they're not connecting with other people, or there are too many meetings or there are too few meetings, whatever the case may be, don't be afraid to take the time to reiterate on that or iterate on that, to scrap whatever you're doing entirely and start from scratch using the feedback that you've gathered from employees. That really can take time, but it is certainly worth it. As far as big pictures for us, there is a big work-life balance in Jotform. We're really big on that. It comes from the CEO down, and having that value communicated to everybody throughout is, just helps us all be on the same page. And then with regards to finding engaging ways to share team updates, one of my favorite things that we do is that we have a weekly demo day. This is largely run in our Turkey offices where our developers are, and each team will share what they've been working on over the past few days. They have a few minutes to share. It's recorded and sent out to the entire company, but anybody has the opportunity to participate in that. So my role as webinar manager is often to translate new products and new features to how users can really take advantage of this. And, having a face to a name when I have a question about a new product or a feature, knowing who to approach and knowing a little bit about who they are and how they've worked on a product is really fundamental to how I can easily communicate with them. Next slide. We use Jotform pretty extensively throughout communication. So largely soliciting feedback is what comes into play here. So everything from, full length employee satisfaction surveys to quick polls about what we'd like to see for new swag. That is all done in forms. All of the data from forms gets collected. So it's really easy for HR to review all of that, see common themes, et cetera. Those demo days that I mentioned, we can also submit to, an idea to share in one of those through a form as well. Next slide. Our second lesson is that we try to be face-to-face as often as possible while striking that balance. And again, I know, in our new world, this means different things to different companies, and this is available to some people more than others. This largely applies to our marketing team and how we approach things and stay connected on the team. So our marketing team has a number of sub-teams. I'm on the comms team, for example. Each team will come in once a week where we have FaceTime with our teams. We can organically communicate, problem solve, chat, whatever, have meetings. We also have an all hands meeting every other week. Sounds kind of similar to what Assad was just talking about with their pizza Wednesdays. We do Fridays and it's every other week, but we all come together and are in office together. We work and we hang out during those days. We try to make sure that our quarterly updates happen on one of those days to the extent possible. So this is where each team shares a bit about what they've done over the previous quarter and what they're doing next quarter. Again, being in person for these makes it a lot easier to organically problem solve, organically communicate about what's going on with each team. And then upcoming also sounds kind of similar to what Assad was just talking about. We have a Jotformers week where the entire company is coming together. So I'm actually on a flight to Turkey in a couple of days where I'll get to meet my Turkish colleagues as well as international colleagues. Our support team is largely working out of home offices, but they're throughout the world. So we're all going to be able to come together. We're going to have all hands meetings. We're going to connect in person with folks that we regularly have video meetings with. Next slide. We use Jotform here pretty extensively for event management. So that Jotformers week, as you can imagine, coordinating 350, 400, I think with support staff, we're even closer to 500 employees is pretty difficult. I imagine, I'm not involved in that, but I imagine it is. So all of our flight preferences and meal preferences, et cetera, that's all done with forms, again, where it can easily be collected, reviewed. We can create visualizations. A number of us just went to a conference a few weeks ago where I pulled together a team dinner the first night, and I got our food preferences. Also pretty difficult coordinating a bunch of people's different food preferences. So we were able to coordinate a meal before, coordinate the menu before we had our meal. That was all done on Jotform as well. Next slide. In addition to this, we do face to screen time as often as possible otherwise. I haven't heard any of the other presenters bring up Zoom fatigue, or hopefully I didn't miss something about that. I know a lot of people do, feel like we're doing too much online, and that's kind of hard. It's hard to balance these days. So for us, having our meetings virtually is a really nice opportunity to be able to have that additional connection. I know if you have a ton of meetings or you're working very collaboratively, that can be difficult. But a lot of us on the marketing team work pretty independently. I'm usually in my apartment writing webinars, mostly by myself. I'll ask for help when I need it, but I'm working independently. So it really works for us to have these video meetings whenever we can otherwise. On our comms team, that means weekly check-ins. Those are usually just a check-in time social. It's not really work-related, but it is an opportunity for us to connect. We have video meetings weekly or bi-weekly with the Turkey teams that we work most directly with. And when our marketing team, sub-teams need to come together on something, we do that by video as well. So for example, later today, our content team is all going to have a meeting where we can discuss what's coming up next with the blog, deadlines, etc. Next slide. Another one of my favorite ways that we use Jotform here is for video coffee breaks to meet new colleagues. I was onboarded when we were still fully remote, and a lot of our marketing team has been. So when a new marketing team member joins the team, one of their onboarding assignments, to speak to what Assad and Payman said about onboarding, one of their first assignments is to create a Jotform where they add in a calendar and can schedule 15-minute video check-ins with new colleagues. This is, I think, really effective in a lot of ways. It's very nice to meet people virtually. Sometimes these Friday all hands meetings wind up getting canceled if somebody, if there's a COVID scare. So, we're never quite sure when we're going to be able to meet in person. So this is really nice to be able to have that connection with people, to either talk about how we'll work together or talk about music preferences or, whatever we want to do in that 15 minutes. It is also a great way to make sure that all new marketing team employees have a fairly good sense of how to set up a form and how the product works. And that really helps them better do their job and get them up to speed about talking or writing about the platform. Next slide. Lesson 4 is that we try to have fun as much as possible. So those all hands days that I've mentioned are as focused on reconnecting as they are on work. We will often have meetings those days, but we also have a long lunch. Sometimes there's a 3 p.m. cornhole game in the back of the office. There's often a couple beers. We hang out. There's music playing. That's about the balance and just finding time to reconnect with each other. In addition to that, when we are not in the office, we try to keep things fun on Slack as much as possible. When we were fully remote, we were also doing trivia events, and any opportunity to connect with each other. But on Slack, we share our, check-in in the morning, check-out in the evening. We also often share communication about Jotforms, articles, tweets. I like to share webinar feedback in there, and then just fun things that anybody wants to drop in. I personally went on a hike last week and saw a coyote on the hike, so I thought that would be a fun thing to share with my colleagues in the area so that they know to watch out for that if they're also on hikes. We try to keep things fun there. I know our turkey team, for example, is really good about this as well. Anytime there's a big launch, there's a launch party, and they just take the time to hang out and celebrate together. Next slide. A couple of other of my favorite ways that we use Jotform coming up here. We use Jotform to nominate a colleague who did an outstanding job. We can do this whenever we'd like. And this gets pushed directly into our Slack channel. So it's a super easy way to just recognize somebody that has gone above and beyond that week. It only takes a couple of minutes, but it is a nice way to recognize the hard work people are doing, connect with each other, take a couple minutes out of our days to just celebrate somebody and thank somebody for the work they've done. Another thing that we've done, especially when we were fully remote, again, now we're in office sometimes, but just in general to stay connected, is an annual wellness challenge. So we have 1 quarter out of the year where we've done this. This year, it was a reading challenge and a workout challenge. And we used Jotform to track the pages read or number of workout minutes each week. Again, with that data summarized, it made it really easy for the person running the wellness challenges to summarize and give each team the updates and keep that friendly competition running strong throughout. Next slide. The last thing I want to talk about is practicing what you preach. Hopefully it's been pretty clear throughout this that we use Jotform extensively. I was talking with Kaylin before we started, and I know Visme uses Visme pretty extensively. If you are running a company where your company can benefit from the product and you're not using it extensively, I feel like that can be a real missed opportunity. It's a really valuable way to make sure that every employee in the company has a fundamental understanding of the product, of the features. They have product use cases in mind. It was pretty easy for me to put this together because we're using Jotform in a number of different ways. So it's always product use cases. And we can easily communicate with our support team and development teams when we run into issues as well. So hopefully we can catch something before a user has any problem with it. Next slide. I've talked a lot about how we use Jotform, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but we use Jotform all the way from job applications forward. So part of my interview process was using a form. But here is just a summary of some of the things I've shared, as well as some of the things that I didn't share. But we're using it all the time, really. And in general, it just helps us keep communication running and keep things running organizationally pretty smoothly. Next slide. just to wrap things up, if you are interested in Jotform, we are forms at our foundation, but I mentioned data management and workflows as well. You can build all of that data visualizations. If you want to manage onboarding or hiring or budget requests, you can build approval flows into Jotform. And one other thing I haven't talked about is apps. So apps allow you to collect multiple forms together in one place. We use that on the marketing team. So that employee recognition form is in our app, as well as a content request. So if anybody on the team wants to request a blog or a video or a webinar, that's all in there. So it's a really nice way to just stay connected and have a singular place where you can find everything that you need. And on that note, I will wrap it up. And, I think now it's time for Q&A.
Awesome. This was excellent. I mean, such an awesome topic. We're having a lot of great conversation happening inside of the chat. So Morgan, Assad, Payman, feel free to kind of see what's been happening inside of there. A couple of questions that have surfaced, though. First one I'm going to present, I actually saved this from pretty early on in the webinar today. And it is what about if you get a new person? This is kind of going all the way back to the onboarding, having a new person that starts. What if you find that their skills are not up to par? How do you deal with that as a training aspect? I certainly have some thoughts on this, and then I'll kind of punt it off to Morgan, Assad, and Payman from here. Being that I am a remote manager and a remote leader, I lean on the capabilities of Loom quite a bit. I am big on recording. Getting recordings that, rather than typing out a long list of bullet answers inside of Slack, I'll even take somebody's list of questions for a fairly new team member. I just did this week, and she gave me feedback this morning on our one-on-one saying, that was so helpful for me. Like, does that work for you to send me Looms? I said, yes, that's actually my preference. I went through all of her questions, and in the event of having a Loom video, it's Loom, everybody, not to be confused with Zoom, it's Loom. Big favorite of mine. I was able to answer her questions, and in the event I needed to flip off of those questions, I could go out and actually show something. And why I love having that show and tell aspect of things is I save a ton of time. While I could have typed something out, it might have taken me 20 minutes to type, refine, grab screen captures, plug them in. I was able to get a 5 to 7 minute Loom video that she now has living and breathing. She can go back and review that at any time. And I also try to strategize those videos. In the event I want to have something a little bit more generic or general, I'll record it in such a way that allows me to have that continuing to be reviewed, perhaps by other team members in the future. And maybe it then even gets encompassed into our Google site, which we use as kind of like our internal intranet. We're a Google Suite house, so we build Google sites in order to really retain and store and keep a lot of items that we want to have a longer shelf life. Payman, I'll punt it to you from here next, because I know you have some pretty interesting viewpoints too on, as you're having a new team member start, if you're finding out that they're not up to scratch, how do you approach that from there?
Yeah, and let me see here. Stop sharing. Multitasking. Can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You know how I am.
Yeah, the question is related to new team members starting, having them onboard and work through the steps of onboarding. If you're finding that their skill set is just really not maybe what it needs to be, or they need a different training perspective, or a little bit more of a focused training, how do you approach that? And maybe even I gave the folks here in the room some advice on how to maybe bend your training style to give that team a little bit more resource and assistance. But how, Payman, do you then, even further down the road, if you find somebody might not be a long-term fit, how do you approach that?
Yeah, very simple. We just fire them. I'm just kidding.
Cutthroat.
No. Yeah, I think, of course, everybody we hire, we have gotten pretty good at knowing that they have potential. In fact, one of the things that we look for is that, are they a problem solver? Are they a self-starter? I mean, for certain positions, that may not be absolutely necessary, but for most positions, especially when you're a company of our size that is trying to be nimble and, still in startup mode and trying to innovate at pace with more resources than less. For most people that are here, they don't know. We have been a bootstrap operation. We never raised funds to this day. And so everything matters for us as far as what can we do with more. more with less. And so when it comes to those that we hire, we want to make sure that they're able to think outside the box. They're self-starters. They're able to figure things out. And even in those cases, there's going to be areas where maybe we could have done even a better job of earlier on in the onboarding or in the middle of the process. There's areas that were overseen or could have been further improved on. And so we detect those and we work closely with that individual. So one of the things we started doing some time ago is basically running a survey across the team. So I'm actually due for one, by the way, even me as a founder. I'm a little bit nervous as far as what my feedback's going to be in that. How is it like working with this individual? What is it that we can do to improve? What is it that this employee or this individual at Visme can improve on? You know, what are some of the weak points or strengths? And look, from a different lens, people will say different things, but it's about finding common areas and how, finding areas that can be improved. So we find what those are and we find a common denominator. And then we approach that individual and we work with them on here's some of the feedbacks provided. It's anonymous, and here are some of the areas looks like could be further improved. Here's some of the recommendations, and then there will be potentially follow-ups a couple weeks later, a month later, to kind of provide a reporting as far as how those specific items are. So that's how we've tried to navigate through those cases.
Awesome. Asad, Morgan, anything to add on top of that in some strategies that you've had when somebody might need just a little bit more help through the training process? And then even so from there, I think even to Asad, I'd welcome you to blend this into something that you had on your portion of the webinar today, speaking to how you get folks, how do you increase that time to value? I think that's like a key piece of this whole point, right? How do you give someone tactical work and just loosen the reins to get them working in things so that you can identify where are gaps that I need to fill with this specific person related to training?
100%. I mean, the first thing you said, love Loom. I also use video to explain it to everyone. I think when you explain it through a video, it's so much easier than like, here are all your answers, let's go. You can always do, like if someone needs extra training, I mean, take out 30 minutes, have all your questions ready. Let's sit down and work through it. Yeah. Ideally, the goal is that's not something you keep doing all the time. It's only for them as they are getting used to the new role. I think one of the most important things itself is within the onboarding, what we do at Sendinblue is we have your 3-month, 6-month, 9-month goals on what you will be specifically be achieving. So as soon as they start their role, they have a document that will highlight what are your top 6 to 7 wins that you need to get done when we do your first 6-month review. And I think that is essential because that gives people the idea. They have to be very direct. I mean, also depends on what role you're jumping in onto. So you have to be very directive of how I'm going to push those roles straight up so they know what they're doing, unless they're just going to be so confused. I remember when I joined, one of my first tasks was when I joined in 2020, my first task was to help build their push for their Series B launch. And that was my main focus for the first 3 weeks. And that was my first project that I completed. And I knew I need to understand everything from within this project itself. And that really made me understand the product so well, made me understand where my strengths are, where I can improve. And then I created a report, sent it to my CEO. And I said, let's have a chat and let's see how can I optimize my work as we move forward. So I think that would be a bit that I would add.
Love your point of creating nice definitions of what do we want to see or where do we want to see you be at X date, right up front. And then allowing that person to basically reverse engineer how they get themselves there while you still provide them support and what they need, make sure they have all the tools and resources, but really just to let them fly. I think that's one of the biggest things with onboarding, setting people free and letting them fly. And I think that's in a remote work, it's essential that you need to be able to do that, because you're not sitting next to somebody in the desk all day. Morgan, this is another topic that was happening inside of the chat. And I think I'm going past the topic of onboarding. Onboarding is really relevant to culture and values, and kind of a running chat that we had happening in the session today was related to leaders. Leaders really being the core focal point of that culture and those values being properly exuded. I've worked at companies where we have amazing core values and one department is doing great at them, but other departments are not. And it was Steve that rose the point in the chat going, well, that it's up to leaders. I couldn't agree more. So Morgan, tell me how you guys at Jotform focus on cultivating your leaders in order to properly exude that strong company culture.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about that, in what I was saying as far as communication. It is really from the top down at Jotform. When the demo days that I mentioned, for example, our CEO usually kicks those off by talking a little bit, about where, what his vision is, or, what's coming up next, or why a new product or a new feature is important for the company. So, just the fact that we all know him, we all, have a face to a name, and we have a sense of who he is, I think helps a lot. We get his values, directly to us, but I think that also helps keep him accountable and keep the company accountable to, what the overall core values are as well. And I think it's in our case, it's a real like trickle down thing. It's um, each leader needs to be responsible for holding up to that, and that is something that I think that we do really well.
Yeah, great. I think that sounds excellent. Again, leaders are important, but even up at the top of that is even leadership above them, and making sure that they're creating the right venue, that all of that just seeps down. And hey, to all of you leaders out there that feel like you might not be getting it, ask for it. Ask for it. One of the things Morgan had on her list and how you could use Jotform, I was like, that is such a good idea. Even going into meetings or asking for things, using tools in order to better capture those requests coming in from your team and giving them a voice, whether it's anonymous or it's non-anonymous, create an opportunity to have that open door and allowing folks to be successful. We're right at time here, everybody. This was a great session. And to all of the folks that joined us today, great participation, great things filtering inside of the chat. Really fun to have those flying in. This session was recorded. It will land inside of your inbox after we end the session today, so you're welcome to view this back anytime. Please feel free to step out there, check out some of the solutions that were talked about on today's meeting. Payman, Morgan, Assad, thank you so much. Anything to add before we bring it to a close?
Do we want to provide the link to the slide as well for those that want to review it?
Please feel free.
That was provided. Okay.
Yeah, well, Payman, would you be so kind to drop that in the chat?
Yep. I've got that here.
Fantastic.
All right, everybody,
yeah.
Go ahead and bookmark this. Anybody should be able to view it, and you can review it and check it out. And I think that's an overview of all information we went through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Payman. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.